Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm just going to walk you through retail sales trends for North America. Now, my presentation is only one perspective of retail sales. It's not the only perspective. You're more than welcome to go out to the bank sites like RBC, TD, BMO, etc., as well as the U.S. government sites like the Bureau of Statistics or Stats Canada to get more information on the trends. Here's a little bit brief bio about myself. I'm CPA CGA by trade. I focus on getting information out, but I've got a background in academia, industry, as well as solutions. Now I'm going to talk executive summary, give you a high-level view of what's happening in the retail sector, talk about housing starts, look at some business inventory information from the U.S., look at Canada-U.S. trends, talk about some retail store closings, look at expansion of retail stores into Canada, talk a bit about government policy from sales tax collection, as well as government policies and cap and trade, and overall look at Canadian retail pricings. So if we look in general in the Canada marketplace, and I'm going to break it into two distinct units. Canada's had some solid retail sales trends for the past few months. That being said, the last month or so, like February and March, we've seen a decline a bit. Now, the key aspect that drives the bulk of about 1/3 of these sales is basically automotive sales. So they have declined a bit, and that being said, they've kind of dropped the overall retail sales percentages down. It's still healthy. We're still probably growing at an overall clip of around 1.5 to 2.2%. So that's a good thing. So we're still seeing healthy retail sales, but we are seeing a bit of a clawback where we saw an annual growth of maybe 4.5 to 5%. We're seeing a decline now. That being said, now if we go south of the border, which is a critical market for exporters, manufacturers, U.S. sales seen some downturn in February, March, but we've seen a huge uptick in April, and that's showing you that the retail sales sector is strong in the U.S., and that's a good indication of the economy, both Canada and the U.S., that retail sales are growing, and that's a good indicator of what you might be expecting in GDP numbers in the first quarter. Brought in housing starts because they're a good indicator in terms of what's happening in terms of the building economy. They support the building trades as well as household furnishings, as well as maybe some of the renovation starts too as well when we start talking about a healthy housing market. Now if we talk about business inventory, and that's critical, that's telling you how much businesses are holding on inventory on hand. We've seen basically a lot more inventory was being held, so there's less ability for these companies or entities to purchase more goods to keep it on hand. Now what I saw basically in March is that business decided to bump up their inventory a bit, and so you're seeing a growth, just marginally improvement over February in terms of business inventories. This kind of gives you a good chart by the sectors, but look at the annual growth between March 2015 and 2016 for Canada. It's still a healthy pace of 3.2%. So that's pretty strong. We probably will still see a clawback, as I mentioned earlier, around 2.5% for this year, but it's still significant growth. Where we're seeing the decline is we've seen a lot of it in the automotive sector, but it's still pretty healthy in terms of the automotive sector for this year. So that's to bear in mind to kind of see the overall trends in Canada. If we look at the U.S., the U.S. itself has struggled a bit too with the automotive sector, but they've also had pretty solid area in terms of retail sales, in terms of the growth year over year, and they're seeing a growth of 3.5% for the last 4 months of a change. Again, they'll probably likely see a clawback to the 2.5 to, well, probably 2% to 2.5 range, but still that's going to show a healthy statement on the economy. We can't talk about the retail sectors unless we talk about store closures. Constantly businesses are going through competitive pressure in retail because that's what the environment is, very competitive. So for example, Aeropostale closed 41 stores in Canada and has filed for bankruptcy in the US. So they are going through a restructuring phase. Sears is still going through a reevaluation of their businesses in terms of profitability because it's hard to compete with the Walmarts, so they're revisiting stuff. And we've also seen other stores, and it's a constant review of the business model where they look at their entities, their stores, and see if these stores are profitable or not, and see what they want to do. In a lot of cases they're moving more to an online model, and they may end up looking at how they do their hub and spokes in terms of their stores to support their local markets, as well as expanding in terms of how they want to support e-commerce. Canada is an interesting marketplace. We see more and more like Nordstrom's, Saks Fifth Avenue setting up stores here. So we've seen a lot of that. The problem that you got to bear in mind too is you got to be very careful here in terms of the market and understanding the demographics. A lot of US retailers make some mistakes when they come into the Canadian market, not understanding the complexities, understanding how the population is distributed, and understanding just the buying patterns. I brought in sales tax collection in because this has been a problem going on for a while. In the past, the old rules were nexus. Unless you had a physical location, you didn't have the responsibility of collecting sales tax. What that states are doing now, and even in the provinces, they're now looking at your intent of your business. How are you operating your business, and where are you growing your business? If you significantly have a presence in Iowa, even though you're not physically there, they will deem to start to look at that's revenue there, and they want taxation on this because they're all looking at this e-commerce. So when Nexus came out, the e-commerce strategy was not there to the degree it is, and we're seeing anywhere between 18 to 25% of business is done online now. So that being said, states want to get a piece of that pie, and that's what you're seeing here is a more emphasis on there. And you're more apt to go out there and read a little bit about Nexus or look at the tax strategies of what states and provincial governments are doing to realign the strategy to align up with e-commerce. I just want to show you quickly about retail pricing index. It kind of shows you where we were in 2015 in terms of pricing strategy and the changes. Now you're always going to see different strategy on pricing, especially when you get in a competitive marketplace. We bring a lot of goods and services, consumer goods inside the country, so the Canadian dollar impacts a lot of that in terms of the overall pricing strategy, but it also impacts other aspects in terms of how the business operates. When you go to grocery stores, you see a lot of competitive prices there. You go on electronics, like if you look at areas like Android boxes where they were going for like $200 a year ago, they're now selling for $60. So you can see competitive pressure in the electronics industry, even TVs. You've seen the prices drop down. So when something new comes in the marketplace, usually you can get a captive pricing for that because it's a unique product. But as more competitors come into that marketplace, the pricing strategy and everything else comes into play, influences how they're able to compete, and that's where you start seeing pricing changes. So that's something to bear in mind. That's what this chart's showing you as well. Now, the thing that I want to bear in mind for you quickly here, government policies will impact consumer pricing. So if you see something like cap and trade, or you see something with hydro rates, you see something with minimum wage, those factors will drive up the cost of business, and they drive up the price that consumers will pay. The statement here by the Minister of Environment for Ontario is probably an understated number. I'm not sure that he truly grasps the depth of what's possibly going to happen in terms of the pricing strategy, in terms of the supply chain, because the supply chain is going to pass these costs all along to the end result, which is the consumer. I have additional presentations. You're more apt to follow me on my YouTube channel. The Canadian manufacturer kind of links up a lot with the retail sales. Same with the US manufacturing results or anything to do with GDP. You should look at that in liaison with this. The other thing I always stress to people, you can't just look at retail sales. You also have to look at housing starts. You have to look at GDP growth. You have to look at different aspects of the economy to get an idea what's going on, because the economy typically has multiple facets to it, so it isn't going to be one driving force that's going to drive it. Retail sales are important because 2/3 of the economy is driven by retail sales, but you also have to look at what's going on with government spending, what's going on with exports, what's going on with infrastructure spending. So you have to look at the bigger pieces. So I always say to people, educate yourself in all aspects of the economy, from both micro, macro indicators as well as key industry drivers. As I said, this presentation is to kind of give you an overview of retail sales. As I said, you're more apt to kind of go out and do a future research on what's required. Thank you.